Okay. Meeting is.
Can't hear anything.
I think we just lost Kurt.
Yeah, I think we lost Kurt. I'll go see what's going on.
Oh, we got George instead.
There you go.
Hey Lee,
Hi.
how you doing?
Hey, a little hot out there today.
It certainly is.
But it must be nice down by the river.
It is. Always 10 degrees cooler.
All right, he's coming back right now.
Hey.
Hey, I'm back. Let's see if I can do this without closing the whole thing this time. There we go. I had a box in the middle of the screen. I went to close it and the whole thing shut down. Okay, first item of business is public comment. I see we have a couple of people. Tom, Nick, you got something to say?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, how are you today?
Good.
Yes, thank you very much. I'd just like to say briefly, for all your people, your committee, your volunteers doing a yeoman's job and trying to maintain our town for the future. You know, Mr. Chairman, we've been incorporated for 382 years now, and I believe the committee and yourself, with all your wisdom and experience, will make sure that the next 382 years will be solid for our water system and not create a situation where some of our other counties and towns are now. And what I mean by that, Mr. Chairman, is when we go forward and make our Yarmouth sewage plant, we do a wonderful job on Workshop Row, managing that facility. We can do a wonderful job on Buck Island Road. We can have jobs there. And in many years, as we treat this effluent, I mean, this waste, we're going to be generating millions of gallons of effluent. And we have to remember on some of our borders that they have done this and now they're in a problem with effluent. So I believe this committee has the foresight to make sure the next 382 years that we'll be in solid shape. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anybody else in the public? Rick, I'm going to move you up for friends if you've got anything you would like to add today.
Sure, Kurt, thank you. I've been away for a while, but just so you know, in 1st of July, we initiated our 6 volunteer water testing locations on Bass River, and that's those are working very, very well. Center for Coastal Studies has already taken our samples and they're in the process of analyzing them. Our intent is to have a good 10 years worth of data. So when the leach field does come online, we'll know exactly where the river is and how it's changed. We also this year, for the first time, we were awarded a DER grant, and we were able to purchase 4 digital data loggers. So we'll have real-time data 24/7 during our measurement period as well. And I think everyone in this committee will be surprised to learn that one of our locations for our digital data loggers will be the Dennis Stormwater Outflow project on Fallons Pond. So we'll have that information as well. So we're pretty excited about that.
I took a walk out by Ware Road the other day, and I noticed those 2 streams where it comes underneath Ware Road. They're very cloudy and very low flow right now.
Yeah, there's no question. We haven't had much rain, and I think the springs are really depleted. And we had a NRCS representative tour the property with me recently, and they're very excited about contributing to the cost of the North Dennis Road culvert replacement project, which is a little little way down the road, but we're making great progress. And we should hear the middle of August whether or not the SNAP grant will fund us again for a second year. We applied for $329,000 for the next phase.
How much thought's gone into the construction side, or like the Ware Road culvert? I know you mentioned the North Dennis Road culvert.
Well, we have a lot of thought into that. I know Jeff has an application in with the state, but it was probably a good third of our grant application for this year would be for further plan development for the that replacement and permitting. So it's front and center for our work plan.
You think it's something we would have to maybe plan town money to help with this or not? Are you hoping the other grants will cover it?
I think that there'll be a need for a percentage of town money when it finally happens, but I think it's a few years away.
Okay. All right. Thank you for the update. Tom Barron, I see your hand up.
Yeah, just a brief note. You mentioned how dry things are. I monitor the rainfall, and for the year, we're 6.5 inches down.
It's amazing how the rain has just missed us
Yeah,
this year. Okay, anybody have anything else?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Lee.
Just had a question for Rick. Are you monitoring any groundwater or surface water on the Dennis side for nitrogen?
We are actually. We have a volunteer location in what's the name of the Grand Cove area, excuse me, this year for the first time. And we also have locations on Aunt Julia's Road, which is directly across from the golf course, and Uncle Freeman's Road. So, I mean, it all kind of, with the exception of Grand Cove, Lee, it all kind of combines in the river itself. But we're hopeful that we get a better understanding of Grand Cove at the end of this year.
Okay. I was just wondering if you would be, years down the road, be able to measure the difference in water quality from both sides of the river, or would that not work out?
I think that's a little too aggressive for our monitoring system. So I'd say no, it's probably not going to happen. But Grand Cove, certainly, and where we're set up in Kelly's Bay, I think is a good chance as well. That's why I wanted to add Dinah's Pond this year, because it is a very shallow and low flow area for the river.
Okay. If nobody has anything else right now, I'm going to move on to Dave and CDM. I see there's a couple other staff people to help him, I guess, with the presentation. Did everybody get the email with Dave's memo from last week? I hope.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. It's all yours, Dave.
Thanks, Kurt. I'm going to turn it over to Kara in a moment, but you did notice that there's another person, Mike Judici from the CDM Smith team. Over the years, you've gotten to know me. I'm the tip of the iceberg. Kara and Mike are the ones who actually do the work. Mike has been getting more involved now, and he was involved in the design phase back in 2010. But he started to get more involved now and starting to look at some of the Route 28 work. So I thought it would be good for him to listen in on some of this discussion, get to know you folks, as well as Kara, who's been involved all along and will be working on helping to pull together the notice of project change. So with that, I'll turn it over to Kara if you want to walk through the memo that we distributed last week.
Sure, thanks, Dave. And I just shared my screen in case anyone doesn't have the memo on them. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. So at the request of the committee during last month's meeting, last June, Dave and I and Mike put together this memo of what we think are Yarmouth's next steps in their wastewater implementation program, in particular with the focus on the notice of project change that Dave mentioned. So the memo that's in your packet summarizes what we think are the next steps. So what our thoughts are here are bulleted out, and we've listed it by time frame. And at the end of all the bullets, there's also a table format calendar view, so we can look at that as well. So in order to finalize the notice of project change, we need the committee and the town to make decisions on a few different items. So that's primarily revolving around your recommended plan. So now that the town has decided to move forward with the Buck Island Road facility, or at least that the RAC has decided to move forward with that facility, we need to further define the sewer service area now that all the flow will be heading up there. There was previous correspondence from Mass DEP that maybe Dave can comment on later regarding a potential need to sewer directly around that area. So we want to take a second look at that and make sure that any area that needs to be included for potential recharge at the Buck Island Road site is included in your recommended plan. From there, we would then want to determine what the initial design capacity will be for the Buck Island treatment facility, so that costs and design components can be updated for that facility. And just as a note, the sum of your first 3 phases, as they're currently laid out, are right around 1.8 MGD. So we'll take another look at that. And then 2 other related items around the facility are determining if the Yarmouth septic treatment plant will remain in operation, so that we can confirm whether or not the new facility would need to accept septage or not. And finally, around the facility, we would want to determine if reclaimed water will still be used in Yarmouth, so that can be included. So once the recommended plan is updated, we would then update your cost recovery plan and include those updates in your notice of project change. There's a couple other updates that we touched on during last month's meeting, including the Bass River summary that wasn't in your original CWMP, and updates to your collection and recharge evaluations. From there, we would want the committee to present this to the Board of Selectmen and the rest of the town to get your buy-in before you submit your NPC, your notice of project change to MEPA. After MEPA reviews, it also goes through a public comment period and gets submitted to the Cape Cod Commission for a consistency review. During this whole time period, we would also continue to coordinate with the DOT project areas that Mike is already working on with Jeff and his team. And then ultimately, we would lead up to a fall town meeting. We've listed some potential articles that the committee and the town may want to consider for this work. A couple of options would be design and bidding fundings for the facility at Buck Island Road, and then perhaps the share of your construction funds for the Mass DOT project areas. I believe that the 3rd project area was included in the last town meeting warrant, or perhaps it was 2 town meetings ago, but we'll need to confirm that that has sufficient funding as well. Moving on to next winter, we would recommend that the town complete their drafts of the land use controls. Those would need to be reviewed by Mass DEP and are needed in order to file with Mass DEP for your SRF loan. Also next winter, something that the committee and the town can be working on is your watershed permits. You may recall that those are needed. You'll need a shared joint one with Barnstable for Lewis Bay, as well as for Parker's River and Bass River, of course, with Dennis. Following up on that, we would recommend you file your groundwater discharge permit for the new recharge site at Buck Island Road, and then continue to develop your fertilizer education program, since you are planning to take credits at this point for nitrogen removed through that program. And ultimately next summer, August of 22, we'd recommend you file for that project evaluation form with the Mass DEP SRF program in order to start your loan process for the 0% loan program. And then the remaining steps from there follow when Mass DEP issues the intended use plan in January of 23, followed by your request for construction funding for the larger project and bidding of that project. So again, as I mentioned, all of that is included in a giant table here in a calendar style format. And with that, Dave or Mike, did I leave anything out?
No, I think you covered it well. There's a lot of information in there. We're happy to take questions from the committee on any of those items that Kara covered. We've discussed a lot of them in the past, but it's really nice to have them sort of all in one location.
Anybody have any questions?
Good question, Kurt. If I can go ahead.
Yeah.
Karen, you mentioned that, Karen mentioned there's a, I guess, a prioritization or reprioritization of the recharge area around the Buck Island facility. Is that because the discharge is now primarily or initially going into that area?
No, it's more because the treatment plant would be located there. So instead of piping all your flow from the treatment plant over to Bass River, we're just saving that force main in the initial years. Ultimately, you will be using both sites.
That much I understand. I misunderstood then. We're not sewering more of the Buck Island area as a result of moving the treatment plant there.
There you are.
I know that.
We are because of proximity, but not because of discharge.
No, okay. Now I understand your question. Sorry, Sparrow. The DEP, when they had discussions previously with us back in 2010, wanted to, they required the town to sewer more residential homes to take out more nitrogen because the effluent was being recharged there down into the Parkers River watershed. We need to have discussions with them because one, we're looking at recommending going directly down to 3 parts of nitrogen now versus it was going to be a phased approach previously. And 2, the town has widened the Parkers River Bridge, which improves the flushing in Seine Pond and the like. So the nitrogen impact from that recharge is not as great as it would have been. However, the difference also is that you have a much larger flow. The previous treatment plant was only designed for about 0.6 million gallons a day. And as Karen noted briefly, you know, if you take half the flow that's projected for Yarmouth now, and you say that's your initial design to be confirmed, that would be 1.8 million gallons a day. So it's more than twice the size. So we need to look at what that nitrogen balance is. But the bottom line is DEP is looking for no net increase in nitrogen in that watershed.
Got it. Thank you.
Headley.
I've got a question for Dave.
Wait a minute, Lee's got his hand up.
Sorry.
Dave, I had 2 questions. First, is there any thought at some point of bringing some of the effluent to be recharged at the Bayberry golf course facility?
Well, as you probably know, the town currently does utilize reclaimed water. The effluent from the septic treatment plant is used on mainly on the Lakes course, but is capable of being used on all 27 holes there. And that is up to 28 million gallons a year. So on a daily basis, that's a pretty small flow, but it can only be applied from late spring to early fall during the growing season as well.
Okay.
So it's a question of whether the septic treatment plant stays in operation, which I think folks are leaning towards keeping that now versus it was being taken offline back in 2010. So the effluent from this treatment plant would continue to meet that reclaimed water need or the irrigation need at Bayberry Hills. So there really isn't any room for additional use of the effluent from the new treatment plant if that source is continuing to be used.
Okay. The other question I had was, we're filing a revised wastewater plan, master plan with DEP. And supposing after the initial phases, it's decided to service or sewer areas that have not been considered before, say, in the Yarmouthport area. Maybe something like, say, Kings Way, for instance. How difficult would it be to change the master plan along those lines if there were a need for sewering other areas that are not currently in the master plan as we file in the near future?
Well, that's a good question. That's one of the reasons why they have the notice of project change format. Because, this is a 40-year plan. The plan's going to change.
Right.
Whether it's in 5 years or 15 years or whatever it may be. And so that's why they have that process to go through and be able to revise it. And, as you know, some of the things that are proposed are intended to be adaptive management as well going forward. So we've tried to discuss a lot of the items in there. So oftentimes making a change is really a formality in the filing. If it were a major change and suddenly you wanted to sewer the whole town and double the size of the treatment plant, they may make you do a lot more evaluations and environmental monitoring and other things. But if it were just to expand to pick up another existing treatment plant that's been out there and was on the border of the treatment plant or the collection system, that probably wouldn't be a big change as long as the nitrogen was being offset appropriately where it was being recharged. So they have that process built into the system for those types of changes.
Okay. The reason I'm asking the question too is I wouldn't want any area of town to feel that they're being excluded. In other words, would want to be able to say to anyone in town that we're not making any decisions to cancel anybody out in the wastewater program. They're all possibilities, and I just don't want to have somebody come to a town meeting and say, well, gee, I don't think I like this plan because you're not including my neighborhood,
Yeah, no, the proposed plan is to meet the minimum requirements to meet the nitrogen removal in your total max daily load for the 3 different watersheds you're impacting.
Right.
And then you've added some additional flow for economic development along Route 28. It's not to say that, some other reason won't come about in the future for you to expand your wastewater program. And I think we've always recommended that every time you approach the next phase, you should be evaluating whether that truly is the next phase and what it encompasses so that you're meeting the needs of the community at that time. We've all put together, with a lot of input from many folks, an 8-phase program, but that's as we sit here today. Who knows what the criteria are going to be 10 years from now.
Right. So I was thinking along the lines, let's say, for instance, here's a scenario. The Matakees school is going to be closed down, or they're going to build a new middle school. And we're going to have that facility for a possible reuse for housing or commercial development or a combination, private-public partnership, something like that. And it might produce a lot of flows that we might want to connect into the system. And that area right now, I don't think is in the plan. So I want to make sure that, we have the ability to accommodate if our crystal ball isn't all that good right now as to what's going to happen. So,
Yeah, I remember when the town was doing their flow allowances. I don't know if Kathy or Karen is still on, but I do recall them discussing that Mattakese area, and I forget if the flow allowance for a potential redevelopment was included or not.
This is Karen. I think that we did add to the
Yeah.
flow for that purpose. We picked that up kind of in our review process. I don't know how much we added, but we
Right.
did add.
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure something was put in there, Lee.
okay.
Tom Barron, I think you had a question or comment?
Yes, to Dave. One of the first items on the letter, evaluate the residential area south of Buck Island. What specific area is that? Is that from between Buck Island and Swan Pond? Is that the area that's involved?
Yeah, it's the actually fairly heavily developed, densely developed area directly south between Buck Island Road site and Route 28, going down along, is that still West Yarmouth Road and
Right.
Old Gray?
You're saying West Yarmouth Road. I'm saying the area with what is it?
Winslow Gray.
Winslow Gray. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's that development that's to the west of Winslow Gray.
To the west.
Kind of 6 half-dozen the
Is
other.
is that going to be required by DEP to be part of phase one?
That was back to the discussion that when Sparrow was asking that, yes, we need to have discussions with them. We were doing a phased approach for the treatment plant back then and only treating down to about 7 parts of nitrogen. I think we look at bringing that all the way down to 3 parts now. So we're taking nitrogen out of the effluent, but we've also more than doubled the flow from the treatment plant. So we need to have those, and the town has already widened the Parkers River Bridge, which increases the flushing up in St. Pond. So we need to have that discussion with DEP, but yes, they were going to require that so that there was no net increase in nitrogen in that watershed from the recharge.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Dave, you mentioned the first 3 phases. Is that based on the original 8-phase map?
Yes.
Okay.
Bob,
And-
did you have a question?
Yeah, I had a question and kind of a comment too. I mean, I just wanted to start by thanking you, Dave, and your team for the list of these critical tasks. I think in our last meeting, we all agreed in order to move forward as efficiently as possible with our treatment in Yarmouth option that, we really needed to hone in on the critical tasks that we need to accomplish in the short term. And one of the biggest deadline items that we're looking at right now is to prepare so that we're able at the fall town meeting to present the article, at least one of the ones that you had recommended in the memo for the approval of the design funds for the Buck Island Road site. And, I also highlight, in order, it seems, to get there, and I want to kind of work out what your timing was. There are some very critical technical issues that need to be resolved. I think before we run into town meeting and present what our plan, budget, schedule is, and the issues of honing down the sewer service area of the plan, determining specifically what the size of the plant for the flow is going to be, you know, what's going to happen with the septage. Those are critical issues. And I'm assuming that we need to resolve those issues immediately so that we can prepare to present our best foot forward on what we have for a planned budget and a schedule for our fall town meeting when we initiate that plant design funding. And like I say, I thank you very much for outlining those critical tasks. And I think possibly what we should look to do is some critical next steps is to get our technical team together to address these threshold issues and to come up with a program that we would essentially be presenting for the fall town meeting that would ask for that plant design funds. And correct me if I'm wrong, I think that what you're saying and what I'm hearing and you know, my thought process is too, is that in order to present that in a coherent fashion and gain the consensus of the community and the approval to get that plant designed, that we're going to have those threshold issues nailed down. We're going to have a proposed new phase 1 service area. We're going to have the size of the plant that we're designing honed down with an idea of when and how expansion would happen. And we're going to have to be able to present people with the rudiments of a phase 1 program. And so I think that, you know, we should start with our smaller technical team probably immediately in addressing to your satisfaction the answers to those questions so that we can present this information publicly. Am I on board with what your thinking is?
Yes, and actually in that regard, a couple of weeks ago, some of our team met with Lori Rosell and Jeff Colby to walk through what had been designed back in 2010, 2011, and to raise some of those issues because, quite frankly, the treatment plant envisioned back then doesn't even look like the treatment plant envisioned today. So, you know, unfortunately, the concept that there's 90% plans and specifications sitting on the shelf just is not the case today. So we wanted to update them. Neither one of them was involved back then. And they asked a lot of great questions, you know, like where's the storage for the trucks and running of the sewer collection system staffing? You know, a bunch of those things. Well, there was a different answer back then than we'd probably get today. So yes, having those discussions over the next few weeks is important so that at least there's a concept. I'm not sure the decision needs to be, you know, hard and fast, but at least there's a concept of what the money being requested for that design, what the backup is to it. I don't know if Jeff or Lori, if you're on, if you want to add more to that based off your discussions. But.
Yeah, hi, this is Laurie. I can just jump in real quick. One thing we did with Jeff and I really looking at the plan, which we had never really looked at closely, there are just like Dave was saying, like there's no garage for vehicles. And then some of the questions of the layout are definitely going to change. I'm not sure where they plan to put these vehicles in the past. Maybe they plan to change something at the water department, but there would definitely have to be either changes to this plan or modifications to the water department to accommodate the staff that's needed to run the collection system. So there's definitely a few things out there that would need to change from the original plan.
If we were subbing out the operation of this plant, how much, I don't see where we would need much of that.
I think even when you sub it out, the subcontractor still would need places to park their vehicles. I don't think they usually do keep them on site, I believe. I know over at the septage plant, they have a few vehicles. I'm not sure they have a full garage though, but they do keep things there.
Well, I think beyond just the vehicle piece, which, you know, certainly can be looked at, but in my mind, a more significant component, this is Jeff, A more significant component is the nitrogen removal piece. If we're looking to get down to something that's more like 3 parts per million, that's a, increase to the treatment components and just needs to be worked through as to, what level of treatment are we looking for? So those are costs, and those are the types of discussions we need to have.
The long-winded answer to your question, Bob, is yes.
Well, like I say, I thank you very much for laying out those tasks that we have to do to get ready to present for the fall town meeting. And I think one of our goals that, we need to work with maybe a smaller team on doing is providing the answers that you need to these threshold questions, so that at least the concept that we have now, we are capable of distilling to the point where we can communicate that to people to the extent that they understand, size of the plant, the service area, the estimated budget, the schedule, those questions that hone in on people's ability to wrap their arms around it and support what we're asking for. It probably take a little work, but I think we have to at least have some of those assumptions filled in so that we're prepared to, present this material on, the new direction in a way that people can get behind. So, I would look forward to, it's very, very helpful to have it laid out like you did. And I'd look forward to jumping into what some of those key assumptions are and coming up with, what a new program would look like.
Another question I had, I know you pretty much mentioned how the whatever plant design we had is worthless today, considering the difference in flows and technology and whatnot. How much design work was done back when on the western end of 28 that's usable? Anything there?
No, that's a good question, Kurt. We want to actually hold a similar workshop with at least Jeff and Lori and Amanda to walk through that. We're also in the process, recently we got contract approval from the town to start to dive into the plans that the designer for the Mass Department of Transportation has started to develop. I think they're at the 25% mark, because we've noticed that there appear to be some drainage structure conflicts and this and that, but we haven't gotten into it in detail. So that system was laid out very well, up to a 90% mark, pumping stations located and everything. So we need to make sure that we can go and try and site those and make sure that they still work within the Mass Department of Transportation, try and see if they can shift some of their structures, since they're only at 25% and we were at 90 at the time. People in town may or may not know that MassDOT's actually adding I forget if it's 8 or 10-foot lane to the south side of that whole stretch of 28 as a multi-use lane. So they have a lot of takings and movement of the travel lanes and everything to work out. So that's why Mike Judici is started to get involved with that. In the town, we also want to incorporate the water main into those documents that the towns pass. They want to replace that water main and upsize it appropriately too. So those drawings certainly much more usable than the treatment plant drawings.
I guess the other question I had, we're talking to 1.8 for the plant. Is there a sweet spot in terms of phasing the plant itself, like modular? You don't want to build it too small. You don't want to build it too big. If we're planning on being 15 years out to get the third phase online, let's say, is there any benefit to starting with a smaller plant and adding on to it later?
No, that's a good question as well. The 1.8 just happens to be roughly half the capacity, and it happens to be what the first three phases add up to. Nothing more complex than that, but if you pick half the treatment plant capacity and you want to design it for a layout to do a mirror image expansion in the future, picking half works out well. So those are the reasons why right now we've put the 1.8 on the table, but certainly that is open for discussion. That 1.8 in those first three phases are build out numbers. So in all likelihood, that would probably get you through the first four phases of construction, because you're not going to get build out flow, certainly, in the first few years of any one of those phases, because that is a flow that will occur over time, not in the first year or two, more than likely.
Yeah, I'm just thinking for, if nothing else, for bidding reasons, if we ran into problems, we had to scale things in certain places, it would seem, we've talked about one part of the phase, if we had to take it off the first phase for now is one way. And if we cut the plant size a little bit, maybe there's a savings that's worth exploring if we needed to.
Well, there would be multiple tanks involved in that 1.8 and multiple mechanical equipment that went with that, so that you could hit the flow swings that are, significant. You're up at twice the average flow in the summer and, 40% of the average flow in the winter. So you've got to be able to take tankage and equipment on and offline in order to meet those increases in average flows, but also the peak flows that come with those numbers throughout the year, and still meet permit.
The other question I had is, in your scheduling, is there tasks that can be done at the same time to expedite the finish line, or is everything just going to take that long to get it done?
Certainly we'd like to try to expedite things, but I think that the schedule that's been laid out is actually fairly aggressive. And then you have to match in to when the town holds either their fall or spring town meetings. You have to match into the state revolving fund loan program schedule. It's not like we can push that up or push it back. They have set dates throughout the year on an annual basis, and that's how they run the program. So there's a lot of items in play that have gone into trying to lay out this schedule. Certainly we'll do whatever we can to try to push it, but yet you also want to make sure that, a lot of those decisions we just spoke about, that the right decisions being made for the community today, and then that people understand it and support it. So there's an education process that has to go along with that, so that you make sure you get the appropriate approvals, either at the local level for funding or at the state permitting levels.
Okay. Anybody else have any other questions, comments?
This may not be the purview of our committee, but for all this additional work, we're still within the budget that was allotted for this planning.
Yes, we had put together a memo of the different budgets that we were projecting for the different phases to meet your town meeting milestones, and that had been provided to Jeff, Lori, Bob. And so we're within those budgets that had been provided.
Terrific.
Baron.
Yes, the last meeting, there was a question of whether or not that $1 million that the representative had set aside for the regional plan, if any of that is available to us as well. Did anyone make a determination on that?
Not that I know of. I've asked the same question. It would be nice to capture some of that. But I would imagine at this point, since it was set aside for DHY as part of that legislation, it would require more legislative action to take it out of there and put it somewhere else.
So would it be a pro rata share between the three communities, even so?
75, 25?
Well, okay. We were projected around 55% of the three towns, so at the minimum, I would hope we could get that much of it. If the other towns aren't ready to use it, I have no problem getting all of it.
There you go.
Here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Isn't that just a bond authorization?
yeah, it was
Okay.
but it was a $1 million set aside from that. And it was also, I thought it was an environmental bond bill, which
That's not real
may or
money.
may not have.
Just so you know, that's not actual money.
No,
So
it's
there's
an
nothing set
authorization for them to
aside.
bond it.
It's just the idea of it.
But it was set aside for the DHY, to help with design work for DHY. So, but whether they're willing to bond it so that we can still use it, I'm okay with that. I don't see what a state's spending a lot of money in this town right now, so anything is a help. I think I've asked most of what I can ask. I know we touched a little bit on some other issues, like the septic treatment plant and some other components of that schedule. And, I guess we'll have to do the pros and cons of the various actions in the near future so we know which direction to run in. Do we have anything else? Okay, I've got minutes on the agenda next.
Kurt, John DeLiso.
Oh, John, okay, yeah.
So when we last met, there was a talk that there might be a possible two-track approach, and at least my terminology, maybe a glimmer of hope that we could go forward with Dennis. My question, I guess, is that now completely over?
I think it's well, I'm sure other people have something to say about it, but I don't think it's totally dead, but I don't think DHY as we envisioned it is going to happen. I think there'll be some joint efforts between Barnstable and Dennis on various things, but I just don't see, from the reaction that I got I went to one of the Board of Selectmen meeting in Dennis, and a lot of people had a lot to say, some of it not factually correct, but they said it anyways. So they pretty much have said they're not interested. So I don't see how we can wait to see if they're going to change their mind. Anybody have thoughts on his question? Okay. So I guess we'll move on to the minutes.
Make a motion that we accept the minutes from the June 28th meeting.
Okay.
Second.
Seconded it. Any discussion, questions? Kyle, do I have to do roll call? I believe I do, right?
You, and you also got Lee is raising his hand.
Yeah.
All right, Lee, go ahead.
Just, did we finally make a definitive recommendation to the Board of Selectmen? Is there something written other than the minutes?
I believe a memo was sent to the selectmen after we made our recommendation.
Okay.
I'll have to check on that, Kurt. I can draft up one if there wasn't one set.
We did draft a recommendation to the selectmen after the last meeting. So if not, we'll make sure they have it, because again, we are advisory and they can change their mind. They can change our mind.
Yeah.
We'll have to make sure they're on board.
I just want to make sure that we're on the record and that the Board of Selectmen understand what the situation, I think they have a good understanding of what the situation is. I just want to make sure that everyone on the board understands that the advisory committee is saying, let's move forward. Let's not drag our feet any longer.
Mark was on the meeting, but I don't see him now, so I'll assume they did get notification of our recommendation. If not, we'll make sure it gets done this week.
Yeah, I mean, let me chime in that clearly the Board of Selectmen discussed the RAC's last meeting and the recommendations that were made, and we talked about it at the Selectmen's meeting. And this might go into John's point a little bit as well, that
Mark was on the meeting, but I don't see him now, so.
He's back.
He's back.
The direction, and Mark can speak on behalf of this as well, but the direction from the Board of Selectmen is, I mean, we all have, the idea that, soon we'll have Dennis, that will be working with us in some capacity, that time will come. And in the meantime, we are completely focused on just amending the initial phases of our plan to provide for a Yarmouth treatment option, not designing both plants at the same time. We're not currently involved in designing any plants in Dennis, but we do envision in the future, we'll be continuing to keep communications open with the town of Dennis, and we envision them to be partners in some yet to be determined fashion for wastewater, and that our efforts right now are geared toward fulfilling that goal of bringing the Yarmouth treatment option to fruition and starting to work on that by having an article on the fall town meeting to get the plant moving. And the selectmen discussed that as the recommendation from the RAC, and they voted to approve that direction as well. So we're all moving forward in that direction, keeping the communications with Dennis wide open, but we're moving toward the Yarmouth treatment option.
Did you want to make any comment?
I'm sorry, I haven't been able to stay with you for the entire meeting. I was in here in the beginning and sort of coming at the end here. And I agree. I got Bob's comments. Yeah, we're looking to sort of lay out our game plan. And that is plan, budget, schedule, timeline, and milestones for moving forward with our phase one.
Yeah, basically the question was, did a selectman get our memo from last time? And did they agree with our recommended direction? And it sounds like between you and Bob, that the board is in agreement with what we're aiming at right now.
I think basically it's a no-brainer at this point in terms of what we've got to do. We just sort of need to lay it out and come up with a budget. Like I said, budget, plan, schedule with milestones, timeline. That's what we need. Well, I'm
Did you
sorry.
get Dave's email from last week with the timeline laid out?
I may have. I honestly don't know.
Well, I'm just thinking maybe I'll make sure the selectmen have that so that they're understanding of what we've discussed. And then obviously next month, we're going to talk about it all anyways.
Yeah, well, we're looking to set up a meeting in August to focus on this topic. Bob and I have been trying to figure out what the best date is.
Okay.
So it's on our upcoming agenda items. But I think it's important to reflect that, we've in June, we wrote a fairly direct letter to both Harwich and Dennis, asking them to let us know whether or not they were still interested in pursuing DHY. And we sort of outlined our support for it, what the benefits were. And, time is, the clock is running, time is money, and we need to make decisions soon. Harwich told us on June 18th that they were out of the partnership, and then Dennis recently voted as a board to move forward with their comprehensive wastewater management plan as a Dennis only option. So we pretty much have an idea what the other towns are doing. Now we got to get focused on what we're doing.
And as Bob said, that doesn't mean that there might not be options to collaborate later, but for the time being, we've got to be very single focused in terms of getting this first phase going.
You know, another place of communication, and maybe I've been informed incorrectly, but Yarmouth is responsible for the dredging on the southern parts of Bass River, which I think we've pretty well taken care of on a regular basis. And Dennis is responsible for the north end. And, you know, they seem to be more focused just on Sassuat Harbor. I see they just got another grant for more dredging in Sassuat, and yet there's no conversation about them doing anything to help the flow within Bass River, you know, the northern reaches. So we talk about widening bridges and doing this and doing that. And, you know, Parker's River, I know Bob had a visit on the river recently about a problem, but when I stood on the side of the river by the lobster boat, half of their retaining, well, I won't say half, but some of their retaining walls sitting in the water. And I don't see how the benefit of widening a bridge is going to be realized as long as we have these giant boulders in the road, in the river, that are catching all the silt going by, and seems to be creating, you know, a sandbar at that area. And then there's another one apparently down by the marina. I think we need to keep looking at those options. We talk about them, but I don't see any serious look from all the towns on a water quality standpoint as versus a navigable water standpoint, even though they do tend to be tied together, because if you can't navigate a boat through it, means your flow and your depths aren't very good in any given estuary. So it'd be nice if part of the conversation with Dennis is, when are you going to start doing your part of the dredging, or are you going to do it? You know, what are the options there?
Chairman, you're about to take a vote on the minutes, but since the subject's moved to actions taken or otherwise at the Selectmen's meeting, can we request a correspondence from the Finance Committee that supported our recommendation for the record?
What, have you seen it?
Yes.
Okay, I know it got sent to the selectmen, but
it's up to the selectmen to sort of forward it to us at this point.
okay, we can get that to happen. That's no problem.
In other words, the Finance Committee is recommending that we move forward with the Yarmouth only option as well and make the financial preparations to do so.
Okay, very good. All right, so that, since I did get off track on the minutes, do we have any questions or other comments on the minutes? We have a motion, so I will do the roll call. I vote aye. John?
Aye.
Tom Barron?
Aye.
Tom Roach?
Aye.
Lee Rowley?
Aye.
Mary?
Yeah, aye.
Spiro?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Tom Durkin?
Aye.
Okay, I think I got everybody. So that takes care of the minutes. Future meeting dates and agenda items, I would imagine we need to meet to prep for a selectmen's meeting whenever they pick a date. I thought it was somewhere towards the middle of the month, but if that moves, we can move with it, I guess. And then maybe get some sense of what selectmen want for a presentation, probably similar to what the materials we just went over today. Any other agenda items people would like to see? No, okay. And I'll get that FinCom letter forwarded to everybody so they have it. I guess we're down to adjournment if nobody has anything else.
Just a question, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Would it be possible to get a current mapping of just the Yarmouth option, both in terms of phase one and the discussion we had earlier, which DEP might require a little bit larger area near Swan Pond? Can we get an updated mapping?
I believe it's posted on your website.
From past meetings?
It's been posted for quite some time, the updated phase 1 and then all 8 phases.
Okay, all right, thank you. Question answered.
Anything else? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion, we adjourn.
Second?
Second.
Second.
Okay, John is a second. I vote aye.
Aye.
John? John, vote to adjourn.
Aye.
Tom Barron,
Aye.
Tom Roach,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Mary,
Aye.
Vero,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
Tom Durkin.
Aye.
All right, thank you.